So my name is Margaret Horvath, and I will be your technical assistant for today. This session is being recorded and will be available on the TDSB website, tdsb.on.ca/community/how-to-get-involved/conversation series. To ensure a smooth session for all attendees, we have enabled Q&A and the chat function. You have been muted and you are unable to share your screen. Everything in Zoom is customizable based on your individual settings. So your display may not be exactly as I described it. However, what should be similar is the black toolbar at the bottom of the screen. It should appear when you move your cursor. To use or view the chat box, press chat icon that looks like a word bubble at the bottom of your screen on the black bar. If you want to open the Q&A, simply click on that Q&A icon. Everyone will have access to Q&A, so please ask your questions there. If you're calling into the session, please use *9, the raise hand function, and the moderator will try to get to your next question. Next step is audio and microphone. The audio quality of this session is based on your individual bandwidth. If you're worried about slow internet connection, you can call in by using the dial-in information included in the invite. The invite is also located on the same web page that I mentioned earlier under Conversation Series. If for some reason your speaker's bandwidth becomes unstable and things become choppy, please bear with us. We'll hear it too, and we will work as quickly as possible to resolve the issue. We do have interpretation for this session. Please click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of the screen to see the available languages. There is a quick survey that we would like you to complete after listening or watching this conversation. The link will be put into the chat. Lastly, you may exit or change the full screen speaker or gallery view by clicking on the top right button or view options drop-down menu. Now, to get things started, I'm going to hand it over to Kay Dean, the Ward 8 rep for Parent Involvement Advisory Committee, more commonly known as PIAC. Over to you, Kay Dean.
Thank you, Margaret, so much. And I'd like to start by saying thank you all and welcome to the Join the Conversation webinar series. Tonight's session is Healing from Racialized Trauma. My name is Katie Benkesing, and as Margaret mentioned, I am the Ward 8 representative on the Parent Involvement Advisory Committee, also known as the PIAC. I'd first like to take a moment to welcome and thank our Ward 11 trustee, Rachel Chernos-Lynn, who is going to also offer a bit of greetings to all of you this evening. Thank you, Rachel. Oh, and I apologize. I'm sorry. I'd also like to take a moment before we get started on our this evening's program to acknowledge that we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. I'll now pass it over to Trustee Rachel Chernos-Lynn.
Thank you, Kadeen. Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. As the trustee appointed to the Parent Involvement Advisory Committee and Ward 11 trustee, I am pleased to bring greetings on behalf of the Toronto District School Board. It is my sincere pleasure to introduce another session in our conversation series to help parents, caregivers, and staff as we get ready for back to school. Tonight's topic is both a timely and important one. So many parents, students, and staff have felt the impact of racial trauma on their mental health and well-being. The events of this past spring and summer have brought into focus more sharply the need to examine, confront, and deal with these experiences in meaningful and healing ways. Tonight's session will focus on coping and healing strategies and serve to continue discussions in this speaker series begun last June. We know how precious everyone's evenings are right now, and so I thank you for joining us and do hope you find tonight's session to be of value. So without further ado, back to you, Kadeen, to get this session started.
Yes, it is my pleasure to be able to welcome and introduce our facilitator for this evening conversation, Mosa McNeely, who is an artist, educator, and who investigates the themes of Black radical imagination, the Middle Passage memory, and embodying the sacred as in her visual art and performance practice. Her works have been exhibited, published, and performed extensively. Mosa has lectured and spoken on panels in universities and has cultivated dedicated cultural and spiritual practices informed by diasporic African knowledges. She has received numerous arts and academic awards and has delivered hundreds of arts education programs in elementary, intermediate, and secondary schools, reaching thousands of learners. Thank you, Mosa, for joining us this evening for our speaker series.
You're muted, Mosa.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Kadeen, for the introduction. So I would love to begin with an opening ritual. So I would like to invite everybody to, settle in to, it's a very, very sensitive topic that we are covering today. So I want us to begin right. And I always like to begin with breath. So, let's begin by grounding ourselves in this space together. It is virtual space, but I'm hoping that you're all comfortable wherever you are in your homes. And let's prepare for having a moving and nurturing and fortifying experience together. So let's begin with breath. I'm going to ask us to make 3 deep, cleansing, slow breaths together. We're going to breathe in through our noses. We're going to hold the breath for a moment when our lungs are full, and then we're going to breathe out through our mouths. So when we breathe in, we first allow our bellies to rise, then our lungs to fill up, and then we breathe out through our mouths and release the breath. So let's do that together. Let's breathe in through our noses. And hold for a moment. And breathe out. You can close your eyes if you want. I'm going to close my eyes. Breathe in through your nose. And hold. And breathe out through your mouth. Breathe in through your nose. And hold. And breathe out through your mouth. Now I'm going to light a candle. So I'm demonstrating, the way I like to start my day each day. And so I'm inviting you to consider this as an, example of self-care practices that you could incorporate, into your own lives. So every time I light a candle, I light it with intention. It is my intention to be a light-bearing being on the planet. And when I say light, I mean within us that those feelings of love and generosity of spirit, our kindness, our joy, our sense of inner peace, to me, those all represent light within. Next, I'm going to make a burnt offering. As a Black woman and a spiritual practitioner, I make a burnt offering in the Ethiopian tradition. I have here a clay bowl with a piece of charcoal on it that I've just lit. And here I have some frankincense. I'll open and I'll just show you if you want to see inside there. It's like little rocks. It's a resin from a tree that's collected, like the sap from a tree. And I put a little frankincense here on the charcoal. And then it begins to smoke, you know, and so as we do make a land acknowledgement to honor the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, we can also acknowledge the African ancestors who were originally brought to this land by force hundreds of years ago. And though millions perished on the journey across the Atlantic, those who survived what is known as the Middle Passage transported their indigenous knowledges and practices with them to this land and shared knowledge, joined forces, and stood in allyship and solidarity as we do today with the indigenous people here. So it's just starting to smoke. It smells really glorious, and it just, you know, in the indigenous tradition, there's a practice called smudging. And so this burnt offering serves a similar functions to purify the space, we can bring the smoke up over our heads in the same way as we've learned about smudging from the indigenous people to purify our minds and our consciousness so that we are prepared to be present and really bring our hearts to the work that we're going to do tonight. So finally, in our opening ritual, I want to pour libation. And this is a Pan-African tradition. It's practiced in many different countries on the continent. So when we pour libation, we honor our African ancestors as a prayer of deep gratitude to the legacy of the African cosmologies that have survived and adapted and thrived throughout the Pan-African world. And it's an act of reclamation of our spiritual inheritance. So when we pour libation, we pour a liquid. It could be water, it could be spirits like gin or rum. We are inviting the ancestors to drink, to be present, to witness our devotion to their memory, and to show them that we've taken up the mantle, and here we are, we're carrying forward their legacy into the future. So I've learned to say ashe in the Yoruba language from Nigeria, which means many things, but for the purpose of this libation, we could say it is the equivalent of amen. And I've also learned to say nsa in the Twi language from Ghana, which means drink. So each time I pour, I'm going to say ashe and nsa. And I invite you all, if you want to unmute, you can join me and say those words with me as I do pour the libation. So this is spring water, filtered water. And I'm going to begin by giving thanks to Spirit, to the divine source of all that is in all of creation, the cosmos, the universe, and the heavens. Olodumare, Kalunga, Morena, Adonai, Elohim, Jah, Ra, Onyame, Onyapompon, Boaje, Anansi Kokuroko, Olo, Runo, Lokuno, Batala, Oshun, Ogono, Yao, Sanyin, Yamanja, Eshu, Nanaburuku. I call you by all the names I know. I call you by all the names to call in the multitudinous aspects of your divine presence that animates all of life. I say Ashe, Nsa, Next, I give thanks to the Mother Earth, Mama Late, Mama Asasaya, and the Abosum, the elemental ones, the earth, wind, fire, water, animal, plant, mineral, spirit, medicines, and totems of the earth. I give thanks for the lavish and lush beauty and sustenance and abundance we receive from the Mother Earth. I say Ashe, Nsa. Next, I give thanks to the ancestors, Nana Nomen Samanfo, the Egungun of all of our origins. And here I invite you to unmute if you want to join me in calling the names of your ancestors along with mine. I'll pour for each of the names that you call, and we can say Ashe each time I pour. So let's allow our voices to join in honoring those who came before us, those who've been victimized by racist police violence, and those whose lives we honor. Regis Korchinski Paquette, Ashe. George Floyd, Ashe. Breonna Taylor, Ashe. Ahmaud Arbery, Ashe. Mommy, Ashe. Daddy, Ashe. Grandma Lila, Ashe. Grandpa Clement, Ashe. Grandma Tootsie, Ashe. Grandpa George, Ashe. Auntie Jem, Ashe. Auntie Titin, Ashe. Nelson Mandela, Ashe. Toni Morrison, Ashe. Maya Angelou, Ashe. And Nanny Maroon, Ashe. 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 We honor the Middle Passage ancestors whose bones lie on the ocean floor, Ashe. When we call one, we call all, Ashe, 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 O, Medasi, Medasi, Medasi Pa. Let's make some noise. Woo! Ishubarabo mojiba, are are. Ishubarabo mojiba, aramonde koito shibarabo, mojiba eleta ishuna. Ishubarabo mojiba, are are. Ishubarabo mojiba, aramonde koito shibarabo mojiba eleta ishuna. Ishubarabo mojiba, are are. Ishubarabo mojiba, aramonde koito shibarabo mojiba eleta ishuna. Ishubarabo mojiba, are are. Ishubarabo mojiba, aramonde koito shibarabo mojiba eleta ishuna. Okay, so now we're ready to begin in a good way. So I'm not hearing the voices very loudly, so I'm sorry if I didn't hear you if you were calling me the names of your ancestors, but we did pour for everyone. And normally what we would do if we were all in a physical space together is we would ask the youngest person in the room to take the water for the libation and offer it to the earth. So I will do that after our session. So as you know, the focus of this series is to provide, session is to provide a forum to explore and dialogue about self-care and mental health strategies for healing from racialized trauma. And I understand that racialized trauma can trigger the trauma for white allies. However, this webinar is centered on the experience of racialized or BIPOC caregivers, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, including those who may identify as people of mixed race. So it's open to all caregivers, and I will prioritize the voices of the BIPOC participants. So I would just like to share a little bit about my work, share some visuals with you. I've been working for 30 years as an interdisciplinary artist and educator and editor. And more recently, I've been doing sacred leadership work and mentorship work in the Black community. So I use the pronouns she and her. I identify as a Black cisgendered woman. So I'm going to share my screen, and I want you to see some images to begin. This is just a stack of books that when we talk about, I'll be talking to you about my toolkit of self-care strategies. One of them is to read books by Black authors about healing and spirituality, and that's a real touchstone for me. So I hope you can see this image. I know that our boxes are showing on the side there, but here you can see some of my work. In my current interdisciplinary work, I work through installation and encaustic mixed media and performance. I center the Black female subject, employing hybrid Vodou and Yoruba iconographies, riffing on memory, mourning, and memorialization. In my arts education work, I've seen the evidence that immersing Black children in African diasporic art forms, holding space for them to dialogue about racism, and teaching them about histories of resistance fosters African cultural literacy, catalyzes agency, and nurtures Black self-love. In my sacred leadership work, I work collectively to envision Black futures of possibility, to curate and hold space for Black healing and community care, with the intention of contributing to a momentum of innovation and freedom. So I just wanted you to see some images there about my work. And there we go. So I'll just post some links in the chat for you to be in touch on social media if you would like to follow up with me. So the format of what we're going to do today, I'm going to just share some information about trauma and share a poem with you. I'm going to share a grounding affirmation for us to do a meditation practice together, a short meditation practice. Then I will share some agreements of participation, a quotation and a song for us to be as a springboard for our knowledge sharing about racialized trauma. Then I'll share some of my best practices, what I'll call my healing from racialized trauma toolkit. And then I'll open it up again for knowledge sharing about self-care strategies. We'll have a few minutes at the end for a question and answer period. And oh, I forgot to ask this before, but we'll see if we can. I would like to, hang out for 10 minutes after the end of at the end of the session, if we can. We'll let you know closer to the end to just have some more informal sharing. So I just want to begin by expressing my gratitude to you for the immense burden of responsibility that you carry, caring for children. I want to acknowledge that the current climate of anti-Black violence adds a layer of trauma for Black caregivers to the already overwhelming impacts of COVID-19 that we're navigating, and to the racial trauma that all racialized folks navigate on a daily basis. So there's a huge need, in my opinion, for and a huge demand for Black-centered self-care and mental health support in Black-only spaces for collective grieving, raging, and healing. So I want to speak about trauma, just to give us some guidelines about just some principles of how we're going to engage this topic tonight. I am hearing some sound. Sorry, there's an ice cream truck going by my place if you're hearing that, but I'm hearing some sound on the line. I don't know if there are, if everybody's muted, but that's better. Okay, great. So I recently led a webinar series for Black service providers for OCASI, the Ontario Council for Agencies Serving Immigrants. It was part of their mental health promotion in immigrant and refugee serving organizations project. And so I think there are parallels between the frontline workers and racialized caregivers of racialized children. OCASI has developed a set of policies and practices called trauma and violence informed approaches that acknowledge the widespread impact of trauma and that emphasize incorporated decolonial, anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and feminist principles of practice. So I refer to these guidelines as a Black caregiver of a Black child who have both experienced racialized trauma. And I'm going to let this be a context for us for this webinar. So I will post in the chat OCASI's guidelines. And I'm also posting some other resources for therapy, for holistic care, for in addressing racialized trauma that are available in the city. So I'm going to share my screen again. I want to just let you look at these principles that we're going to use as guidelines for our conversation today. So the first principle is working from a generalist approach. So I've made an I statement here. I agree to treat everyone as if they have been subject to trauma. You know, if we agree to treat each other and our children as though we have all been subject to trauma. This enhances what's called a universal trauma precautions, which aims to provide a common ground and create a culture for addressing trauma, offering consistent ways of responding to each other's stories. Secondly is preventing re-traumatization. So the statement I have here is that I agree to be mindful that I may need support following this session if I experience vicarious traumatization or if my existing trauma is triggered. So this principle acknowledges that caregivers, when we listen to the stories of other people's trauma or disclosures from our children, and we witness the impacts of these experiences, it can trigger trauma, our own trauma, or we can experience vicarious trauma. So this principle just alerts us to be mindful, to seek support for care following this webinar. And when we are responding to our children's stories of trauma. The next one is fostering safety. So the statement is, I agree to be sensitive to everyone's emotional, psychological, interpersonal, social, cultural, and systemic vulnerabilities. You know, safety is the foundation of trauma-related work. However, in the context of this webinar, I really don't believe I'm able to make that promise of fostering safe space. In fact, I think that I have issue with the term safe space at all, because living in this world, I don't really know if it's actually possible. But what I think makes more sense is fostering brave space. And so in this webinar, I can make a commitment to hold space. We can agree to participate collectively and strive to be sensitive to the emotional, psychological, interpersonal, social, cultural, and systemic vulnerabilities that we have. And if I feel that the dialogue moves in a direction that risks the safety of anyone, I will intervene. And finally, continuing growth and community building. I agree to make the effort to foster this space as a space of hope and to support everyone to cope and grow. So, you know, we despite our adversities, I have a belief in the human capacity for growth and resilience. So I'm wanting to, you know, work together with all of you to foster this as a space of hope. So this poem, I think, is fitting in this respect, speaking about brave space. So I will just read it to you. It's written by Mickey Scott Bay Jones, and it's called An Invitation to Brave Space. Together we will create brave space, because there's no such thing as safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars, and we all have caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. This space will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side. So, what I would like to do next is lead us in a meditation practice. I'm going to play some music. I will give some guidance on, I'll share a grounding principle, a grounding affirmation for you to hold in your mind, and I'll give you a mantra to recite in silently. So please make yourselves comfortable. Sit in a comfortable position. And I'm going to share some music first. This song is called Still Moment by Tunde Jegede. Our grounding affirmation is, when I care for myself, I'm caring for my community. The symbol here is an Adinkra symbol from the Ghanaian Adinkra symbol system in West Africa. The symbol is called Sankofa. And Sankofa means learn from the past, go back and fetch what has been lost. I chose this symbol because I feel that self-care and healing is a kind of return to the self. So now we will begin our meditation, drawing from the words of Deepak Chopra. As we prepare to meditate together, let's take a moment to consider the grounding affirmation. When I care for myself, I am caring for my community. When I care for myself, I am caring for my community. Now let's prepare for our meditation. Make yourself comfortable and close your eyes. Begin to be aware of your breath and just breathe slowly and deeply. With each breath, allow yourself to become more deeply relaxed. Now, gently introduce the mantra, Mojuba Iya. This mantra means I praise the mother in the Yoruba language from Nigeria. Mojuba is the essence of reverence, giving praises, devotion. This mantra connects you with the archetypal energy of the mother, nurturing, caring, protecting, in honor of our mothers, in honor of the roles we play as caregivers in our children's lives and for ourselves. As you repeat the mantra, feel the flavor, feel the energy of giving sustenance, enlivening your spirit. Repeat it silently to yourself. Mojuba Iya. With each repetition, feel your body, mind, and spirit open and receive a little more. When you find yourself distracted by thoughts, noises, or physical sensations, simply return your attention to silently repeating the mantra. Mojuba Iya. Mojuba Iya. Mojuba Iya. Please continue with your meditation. I will mind the time, and you will hear me play a soft chime at the beginning and the end of the meditation. It is time to release the mantra. Continue to sit restfully, inhaling and exhaling slowly. When you feel ready, you can open your eyes. As we continue with our webinar, and tomorrow, if you remember, contemplate the grounding affirmation. When I care for myself, I am caring for my community. When I care for myself, I am caring for my community. When I care for myself, I am caring for my community. Ashe. So So let's move on now to our next section. I'm not able to share. Let's see here. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen again. And I want to reflect on this quotation. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare, by Audre Lorde. So here we have an Adinkra symbol that is called duafe. It looks like a wooden comb, an afro pick. And this symbol represents beauty and self-care. It represents love, and it represents hygiene and being well-groomed. So I just invite us to reflect on this quotation. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is an act, it is self-preservation. And so I think that a lot of racialized folks, we sometimes may feel a little squeamish about this notion of self-care, because it may feel like an indulgence or extravagant or you know, but you know, I've come to know and believe in my own life that it's absolutely critical. And as Audre Lorde puts it, you know, when we talk about racial violence, then choosing to care for oneself, Black self-love, is caring for one's brown body, one's Black body. It becomes a real political act that counters the hatred and violence that is perpetrated against us. So I want to share with you here a song by Sweet Honey in the Rock that I think is very galvanizing and uplifting, and then from there we'll start to dialogue about racial trauma. And we'll believe in freedom cannot rest. We'll believe in freedom cannot rest. You believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We'll believe in freedom cannot rest. Hear me talking to you. We'll believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of Black men, Black mother sons is as important as the killing of white men, white mother sons. Do you believe in freedom cannot rest? Sing it with me if you like it. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. The older I get, the better I know that the secret of my going on is when the reins are in the hands of the young who dare to run against the storm. Cause to me, young people come first. They have the courage where we fail. And if I can but shed some light, I say, carry us through the gales.
We believe in freedom and not rest. Let me talking to ya. We believe in freedom and not rest. And struggling myself don't need a whole lot. I've come to realize that teaching others to stand up and fight is the only way my struggle survives. I'm a woman who speaks in a voice, and I must be heard. At times I can be quite difficult about no man's word. We believe in freedom and not rest. And we talking to you. We believe in freedom and not rest until not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light just to shine on me. I need to be one in the number rising, stand against tyranny. We believe in freedom and not rest. Oh, we believe in freedom and not rest until it
Okay. So, all right, so we're back. So I'd like to invite us now to do some knowledge sharing. To share, I know there must be a lot of knowledge in the room. We have 26 participants who are, you know, caregivers. I'd like to invite you to share your knowledge, wisdom, experience, your insights, reflecting on the content we've covered so far. And, you know, I just want to have some agreements of participation. I know it's a bit different because we're not actually hearing each other's voices or in a room together, but I would like us just to have these agreements in mind as we hear from each other. So I call these the freedom agreements, and they're guidelines that I learned from Professor Jean Harita-Warren from the Environmental Studies Department at York University for establishing ethics of shared responsibility and group agreement. So we begin with the principle of respect. So we agree to use appropriate pronouns and other modes of address as requested. We agree to step forward and then to step back. We agree to support each other, knowing that that differences in opinion are okay, and that some opinions have more power than others. And we agree to give and take time to reflect. Second, we agree to confidentiality. We agree to the right of privacy and seek to and receive declared permission before sharing the stories of others. We agree to discuss events, dynamics, possibilities instead of personalities. And we accept that we have personal investment in our own biases. And third, we agree to the principle of agency. We agree to share responsibility and accountability, to allow mistakes as part of learning. We agree to address conflicts with freedom from institutionalized modes of violent communication. And we agree to ask questions when we don't understand while learning and honoring boundaries. So, I want you to expect that this may be a difficult or an uncomfortable conversation for some people in the room, uncomfortable if our biases are challenged, if trauma or shame is triggered. And I'm going to support everyone to stay present, to keep your hearts open, to listen and speak from the heart. No one's expected to teach anyone or be responsible for anyone else's feelings but your own. We're working towards sharing accountability and responsibility for change. So please be mindful to share only what you feel comfortable sharing in an open forum such as this. As your facilitator, I'm holding space for vulnerable sharing for us to practice community care using these parameters of the freedom agreements. So, so I think we will field any questions that are in the chat or in the Q&A. And I'll try and answer. And if you have more private comments or questions that I can, you address privately, I can be in touch with you after the session, but let's see if we have, I'll turn it over to Kadeen to share any questions that may be already there in the chat.
Thank you, Mosa. I'm just taking a look through the chat and in the Q&A.
All
and
right.
at the moment, there's nothing specific that's been put in there. We have in the chat a number of links that you had shared earlier, just around mental health resources, Black therapists in the city of Toronto.
Okay.
And then as well for all participants, at the very beginning of the chat, there is a survey just to record your experiences in the conversation series. So that is all, there's also a link there for anyone to complete that survey as well.
Okay. So I could maybe offer some guiding questions to inspire some dialogue. So here I will just lay out a few questions for you here. What are some examples of experiences of racialized trauma? How can we address it in the moment? How can we protect ourselves from traumatization and re-traumatization? What are some impacts of racialized trauma? What are some of the barriers to addressing racialized trauma? What do racialized caregivers need from white people to support our healing from racialized trauma? What do racialized folks need from people in our own racial groups to support our healing? And what else can the TDSB do to support racialized caregivers in addressing and healing from racialized trauma? So I'm gonna I'll post these questions in the chat as well. Yes, it's a bit of a, it's a bit of a difficult space maybe for this kind of dialogue, considering we don't see anyone's faces, we don't hear your voices, but, perhaps we can still engage in some dialogue about them, about the topic, in this format. I'll give another moment or so for anyone to post anything. Oh, I see some responses here. This looks like this is from Michelle. Being in a work environment where racial slurs are used frequently, yet politely, that definitely is that's a form of racial trauma that can be triggered by an experience like that. It's so difficult in Canada. There's a particular kind of brand of racism here that is veiled in this kind of politeness that we're known for in this country. And there's also a sort of a narrative of benevolence that the nation state has managed to maintain, though that is being tarnished recently with in the last years with the truth coming out about the residential school history in Canada. There was the state was forced to acknowledge that as cultural genocide with the Black Lives Matter movement that has really caught fire. Canada's anti-Black racism, the police violence has become visible. So those, so the whole veneer of that Canadian politeness and national benevolence is now getting challenged. So, but in interpersonal experiences, yes, those kinds of comments can happen. People may say things that they don't even realize are racist. I know I lived for 10 years in Guelph with my daughter, and part of the reason I returned to Toronto was because of sort of unchallenged white supremacy that was, before you can even address it, you have to actually convince people that it exists, that it's happening, so yes, that is, it can be challenging to even name it. Here's another comment. The trauma at times seems to sneak up on you slowly, constant fatigue, stress, anxiety in certain spaces, can't sleep, eating challenges. So it's like a PTSD response. It's a cumulative, can be those, the term microaggressions became popularized in the last years, and this sort of, bit by bit, it's like a slow kind of erosion of your health with having to be confronted with those daily, seemingly benign encounters and experiences. And then the cumulative effect and begins to affect your mental health, your physical health. So are you seeing any other comments or questions, Kadeen?
I did put in there that just having your own personal experiences go invalidated or unacknowledged, and having to constantly justify your truth to others. So even in being able to share our experiences, or even thinking about our children's experiences, particular to the school system and otherwise, just having to feel like you have to justify to somebody else why, you know, you may have experienced an act of racism, intentionally or unintentionally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so, you know, what are some strategies that you've used in coping with that?
They become very personal, right? So it's really the ways in which we are able to fortify at home. So in our own personal family unit, how we can speak about those things. I find as a parent being able to offer space to my children to speak their truth, whether I may agree or expect accountability in other ways, be it on their end or on the other end of it, but really to just hold that space and be able to speak as openly and directly as we can about those things. At home, to be able to offset the fact that there are not quite as many spaces outside of home to be able to do those things. So I don't know that it's a very clear strategy yet, but one that we're just trying to nurture about how we can support each other through some of these challenging experiences, and what it also means to just kind of stay motivated and focused and not become disheartened by some of these things that happen as well, you know, in our day-to-day lives, right?
Yeah, you know, I think that that's definitely a strategy. We may not even validate the strategies that we have because we don't name them as such, you know, but that open and honest communication space for validation, that's very powerful, you know, to offer that at home. So I would definitely put that in your toolkit, sis, because that's yeah, absolutely. So I see a question here. Can you share some strategies to help overcome? So yeah, why don't I move on to that then? I have here some strategies that I would like to share. Let me share my screen again. So, so I've divided it into a few different categories. So this first one, the statement is, when I allow myself to feel, I'm healing from racialized trauma. This symbol is an Adinkra symbol. It's called EPA, and it means handcuffs. It actually visually is meant to represent handcuffs. And so it's a symbol that represents justice. And I chose this to represent trauma, the trauma of racialized trauma, the trauma of mass incarceration that Black and Indigenous people experience. The handcuffs are like chains representing slavery. And I consider the current prison industrial complex the modern day slavery. So I think that it speaks to, you know, confronting anti-Black racism, mourning and memorializing the loss of Black life. And this is a symbol of something we have to break free from to attain freedom from the injustice. So, you know, so when when identifying, understanding, and creating a political position on racial trauma, I see this is my first kind of set of strategies where first I strive to understand what is racialized trauma. I unpack trauma with my therapist on a regular basis. So having someone to talk to, a professional person to unpack whatever those experiences of trauma are on a regular basis, allowing myself to feel, because that's like the validation that Kadeen was talking about. It's like when our feelings, if our experiences are being questioned, whether or not it's real, if we allow ourselves to feel the pain and the outrage, that is really important for it to be, to be real to us and to be validated by somebody that we share it with. Knowledge sharing with Black folks. I mean, I'm speaking from a Black perspective. These are my tools. So you can, if you're an Indigenous person, if you're of a different racial group, then you can adjust these strategies to suit, your particular cultural and racial identity. And engaging in culturally relevant research is another aspect of this. Having that understanding, awareness, and language to really unpack what is it that I'm experiencing, what is this trauma, to make it real, and to look to thinkers on the topic and inform yourself with that kind of research that is relevant to your cultural and racial identity. When I dwell in stillness, I am communing with the divine. This is another Adinkra symbol, which is another version of the Sankofa symbol, which means to connect to your history, to reclaim your roots, and this is particularly important for people of African descent in the diaspora, in the Western part of the world, outside of the continent. Even in the continent, colonialism was a very thorough and project that has severed many of us from our connection to our identity as people of African descent. So, and so this symbol of Sankofa is very popular in diaspora for people of African descent who are making that effort to heal by reclaiming their positive sense of Black identity. So this set of strategies are around spiritual practice. When I dwell in stillness, I'm communing with the divine. So for me, it has been critical to commit to daily spiritual practice. I keep an altar, or you could call it a shrine, or it may just be a windowsill with a special stone and a candle, just a dedicated space in your home that you can go to, and that is a sacred space for you, where you may sit to practice meditation, you may contemplate there, you may water a plant, you may light a candle, you may have objects that are meaningful to you, a beautiful piece of cloth. I also participate in ceremony. I'm part of a spiritual community, and that is very fortifying and nurturing for me to attend ceremony. We go to the water's edge, we light a fire, we build an altar, we make offerings, we pray, we dance, we sing, we chant, we play the drum, we feast. So these, and journaling, for me, I find it very cathartic. If I've had an experience that was painful, I feel the emotions are building up in me, I'm outraged, I journal, and it helps me to release it so it's not all built up inside my head and in my body, and I can release some of the pressure by journaling. So I consider all of these to be spiritual practices. I heal the temple of my body with medicines from Mother Earth. This symbol is called Asase Yeduru, and it speaks about the divinity of Mother Earth. that we must respect the earth and care for the earth and recognize the importance of the earth to human life. So this set of strategies have to do with my physical health. So I drink plenty of clean water. I have a quota. There's an app on my phone, my water app, and I try and keep up with drinking a minimum of 1.5 liters of water every day. Clean water, filtered water, not necessarily tap water. I am very dedicated to eating wholesome foods. I have a predominantly vegetarian diet. I try and keep the food organic in the household as much as possible when I can afford it. I practice yoga regularly, or any kind of physical activity, but I find yoga to be a wonderful practice because it builds strength, it builds balance, it builds flexibility, and it ties to the spiritual practice, because when you're on your mat, depending on the teacher, they can bring you the practice through a spiritual lens, which, you know, it ties body, mind, spirit, you know, it helps to integrate those different aspects. Communing with nature, I think, is critical, especially those of us living in urban environments. And in the city of Toronto, it is such a green city. I mean, in fact, I've heard Toronto referred to as a city in a forest. We have a lot of green space in Toronto. There are rivers, there are ravines, there's the lake, there's the beach, you know, so I find when I commune with nature, it is so grounding. It helps me balance. I feel there's a sensual kind of relationship that I have with nature that is very healing for me. And working with medicinal plants. You know, there are many medicinal plants in the Pan-African tradition that we can work with in supporting our health. You know, every day I put a chunk of aloe in my smoothie. I take black seed oil, a teaspoon every day. I use frankincense and copaiba and myrrh oils for healing my body, my aches and pains, to reduce inflammation, to calm my nerves. You know, shea butter is my go-to for moisturizing my skin. Coconut oil has so many healing properties. So I work with medicinal plants as part of my regime of physical health. And finally, let we dance and be free, man. This symbol, Faudi, is another Adinkra symbol that represents freedom, emancipation, independence. So I chose this symbol because I want to be free, and I want racialized people to be free. And I think it's our responsibility to find freedom praxis. You know, like people of African descent, we have always reveled in dance to free up ourselves and to defy oppression, to express the ecstasy of freedom. So dance is one of my freedom practices. I make sure to dedicate time to pleasure. Again, this probably sounds like an extravagance or an indulgence, but truly, you know, children are our best teachers when it comes to reveling in pleasure and joy and laughter in life, you know. And so I think that it's very important, especially for those of us who are caregivers, those of us who may be activists or community workers. It can be a real grind to always be serving and nurturing others and fighting against oppressions in society. So I think that it's so important for us to dedicate time to pleasure in our lives. I nurture my relationships with Black women in my life. That's a way of my staying connected to my racial group. It's important to me to cultivate and nurture relationships with women in my community. I strive to have the courage to speak my truth, to speak out, to voice myself if I have to express something that is difficult to say, that may ruffle feathers. I think that's an important part of my sense of personal freedom. I cultivate my cultural identity so that it's not just something I paste on or something that I speak about, but it's an integrated part of my life. And then I devote my life's work to what matters to me. So I try my best to cultivate my life's work around what's meaningful to me. For me, what breaks my heart the most is seeing children suffer. So I have dedicated much of my life's work to serving children of African descent through art and arts education projects. And, you know, what matters to me is Black women having freedom and how to lead intentional lives and to be creative. So I make art and I work with women in my spiritual community. And so these are the ways I strive to devote my life's work to what matters to me. So those are some of my strategies. And I see we're at 7:53. So I'd just like to open the floor again. And if anybody would like to share any of your self-care strategies, I'm sure there's a lot of wisdom in the room that we could all benefit from learning from each other. I wonder if at this point we have just a few minutes left. Perhaps we could open the floor for folks. If we're not seeing much in the Q&A or the chat, I don't know if people would be more inclined if they could speak. Maybe we could allow people in the participants window if you want to raise your hand, if you would like to speak. Okay, thank you. There's a comment from a participant here that the self-care practices are definitely soothing and encouraging a healthy approach to life. So thank you for that comment. Okay, well, so maybe we can, just close then with some takeaways. I would just invite folks, to make a commitment to yourself to build one or more of these practices from the toolkit that I shared with you into your daily life. Adjusting to suit your intuitive sense of what works for you and what is meaningful according to your own cultural identity. But the dailiness is, I believe the dailiness is important. Even if it's, very short, even if it's just 5 minutes every morning, as soon as you wake up, before you brush your teeth, or maybe 5 minutes before you lie down in your bed at night and close your eyes, you just maybe take a moment to breathe. Take a moment to journal. Maybe try and eliminate something from your diet that isn't working for you. Drink more water. These are practices that we can incorporate into our daily lives. Okay, well, maybe I'll play some music to take us out.
So Mosa, we actually had a comment in the Q&A
Okay, great.
box that just says, from Sophia R, thank you for the session, and can you end with a short meditation? And then I'd also like to read a comment from Tracy Halliday that was in the chat that just said, thank you so much again for sharing these different areas of self-care. I plan to incorporate these areas into my classroom this September, as I'm sure both my students and I will be under some stress at the beginning of our journey together. So again, just thanks so much for your sharing and your offering your tools and a request for a meditation.
Oh, okay. So we have 2 minutes left. So let me maybe play some music for you, some quiet music to take us out. Again, this is Tunde Jegede. So please just sit comfortably where you are. Sit with your back straight, your feet planted on the floor. Rest your hands in your lap and close your eyes. And allow yourself to just focus on your breath. Breathing slowly and deeply. Allow yourself to feel more and more relaxed. Allow your mind to focus on the affirmation. When I care for myself, I am caring for the community. When I care for myself, I am caring for my community. And just breathe slowly and deeply. exhalation. Continue to sit restfully, inhaling and exhaling slowly. When you feel ready, you can open your eyes. And take this affirmation with you. When I care for myself, I'm caring for my community. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for participating. Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me, Michelle Monroe and the Toronto District School Board, and for your commitment to this work for racialized caregivers and addressing these important issues in our self-care and health. Thank you so much.
And Mosa, I just also want to extend our greatest thanks as well for your time and your energy and your presence for joining us for this speaker series, and from all of the parents at the PIAC committee, as well as those in attendance tonight. We not only appreciate you sharing from your toolkit, but also for creating a space for us that was so warm and welcoming and very nurturing and healing. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kadeen.
And I've just noted in the chat that Michelle has also said thank you, Mosa, and thank you to everyone for joining us this evening, and to have a wonderful week. Margaret, I don't know if there's anything else that needs to be done or said before we close for the evening, so I'll hand it back over to you as well.
No, I just want to thank everybody for coming tonight. It was a great experience. We'll be having another session very soon. But thank you, Mosa, for sharing your time with us. That was very relaxing.
Thank you so much, Margaret.